Hello and welcome to the SubQuery video where I'm going to show you a very simple Hello World project. Before we jump into the code though, let's take a first look at what SubQuery is. It allows you to power the next generation of Polkadot decentralized apps, allowing you to first of all filter and extract real-time data from a blockchain. Next, you can transform and aggregate the data to suit your needs. And then you can save this data into a high-performance database for retrieval later on. And the final step here, number 4, you can query your dataset using what's called GraphQL syntax to power decentralized applications such as your mobile app, your web app, webhooks, and even data for other blockchains. The other services that we provide are, we've got the SDK, which is open source, allowing you to create your own SubQuery project. We've got something called SubQuery projects, which is basically a hosted infrastructure, allowing you to deploy your app where we run it for you for free. We've also got SubQuery Explorer, where you can browse other SubQuery projects created by the community, so you can understand how others are using SubQuery. And finally, we've got the SubQuery Decentralized Network, which is currently a work in progress. Be sure to check out our tutorials on our documentation website, and we're also powering some of the biggest Polkadot and Substrate projects already on the market. So with this, let me go right back to the top, and we'll first of all jump into the documentation here, where on the left hand side under Quick Start, we're basically going to follow this Hello World localhost plus Docker tutorial. So this is the reference guide. However, let's go ahead and jump into Visual Studio Code, and I'll show you how this all works. Now, there are some prerequisites required before we get going. Firstly, you'll need to install Yarn. You'll see that I've got Yarn installed version 1.22.17. You'll also need Docker. I've got version 20 here. Docker is a really useful containerization software, allowing you to get your application up and running really quickly because it contains the node, the database, and the query engine all in one place. And finally, you're going to need the Subql CLI or command line interface. You'll see I've got this one here, version 0.15. Now the chances are you may not have this, so let's go back into the documentation under installation, and you want to install the CLI using either the yarn command here or the npm. Once you've got this up and running, let's go ahead and run the CLI command. We're going to use the init keyword here and hit enter, and it's going to ask us for a project name. Now if we don't provide anything, it'll take the default in yellow here, so let's go SubQL Hello World, for example. I'll leave the Git repository blank. I'll accept the default, which is the Polkadot production RPC endpoint here in yellow. And you'll also see that author is mandatory, so let's provide a value there. And then I'll just hit enter and accept the defaults. And you can see here that the starter project has been created. On the left hand side, you can see the scaffolding provided. All these files are created ahead of time, helping you create your project a lot quicker because you don't have to create these files one by one. So let's go into this folder here, and the first thing I'll run is yarn install just to download the node dependencies. This will take a handful of seconds. There we go. Now next up, I want to run a command called yarn code gen. What this does is it takes the schema file here and it's going to auto-generate some TypeScript for us. So it's going to create an extra folder here. If I hit enter, there's a types folder that gets created, and this starter entity you can see here is auto-generated, so you don't want to edit this. The last thing I'll do here is build the actual code, and then we'll go ahead and run the Docker command. We're going to pull the image first. So this is Docker compose, and then I'll start the image by running Docker up. Now this may take about a minute or two depending on the type of computer that you have and also your internet speed. Okay, so now we can see that the SubQuery node has started, and we're also fetching blocks as well. So that's a great sign. Let's now go ahead into the GraphQL Explorer, otherwise known as Playground, and we'll make our first query. To do this, you want to go to localhost 3000, and you should see here that I've actually got a query in cache, so it remembers this. And if I hit run, we're at 1 to 8. If I run this again, you can see it's slightly changed, but it's quite hard to see. So ideally, what we want to do is let's order this. Let's go first. We'll return the first 10, and then we'll also order by, and then we'll go field 1 descending. And now you can see we've got 451. And if I rerun this, I get 461. The other fields that we have are fields 2, like so. And in future videos, we'll go ahead and rename these to something more interesting and meaningful. But here, this is just a quick example of getting something up and running. And of course, we can jump into the documentation here, where we're traversing the query down to starter entities, down to nodes, and of course we've got our fields here. So to get a bit more understanding of what these fields are, we can jump back into the code here. We can go into our mappings file, and you can see here field 1 is basically the block header or the block height. Field 2 is the account ID. Field 3 is the balance. Field 4 is the block timestamp. And field 5 is just a Boolean, which is hard-coded to true. So there we have it. If you've managed to follow this tutorial and successfully made your first query, then congratulations. The next step is to jump into the documentation, and in the Quick Start Guide, jump into the Hello World Explain, because the chances are you probably didn't understand what we actually did. So this link here goes through step by step explaining what actually happened under the covers. So highly recommend that. However, look forward to catching up with you on future videos.